Thank you for attending the ViewTech virtual ASNT presentation. My name is Chris Courtwright, and I'll be working you through some inspection tips. ViewTech has been an industry-leading Borescope provider since 2009. The main things we see is addressing our repairs. The main things we see are a cracked lens that usually happens when it's either dropped from a high spot or it's run over by a chair. We see broken articulation where there's pulling or it's coiled up. Typically we see broken articulation when somebody has it coiled up and they try to articulate the borescope. Should always have it stretched out as much as possible. Also, we see breaking when somebody has their borescope in the inspection and they pull too hard on the insertion tube and they end up breaking it because it's not properly steered out. And then the final major repair we see is when somebody crushes it in the insertion tube in the case. That is more the case with our 2.8 and our 2.2 millimeter borescopes. We do have a full range of video borescopes from 2.2 millimeters, 2.8 millimeters that are fully articulating, all the way up to our 6 millimeter dual camera system, which is our most popular borescope right now in pipe inspections because you can switch to the 90-degree camera. So some best practices before you start your inspection, you want to make sure you get your cleaning swabs and alcohol. Clean your lens appropriately. Just take the alcohol and rub the lenses. And then wipe down your insertion tube with a nice towel or even an alcohol swab. We tend to use alcohol-based cleaners on the insertion tube. It is braided tungsten, so you shouldn't have a problem with degrading that. And they are IP67, so they're technically waterproof to over 1 meter. The next thing you want to do is check your batteries. In this unit, the battery is in the handle. It's 2 thumb screws. You remove that, put in a new battery. Make sure both of them is charged. You should get 2 to 4 hours of life out of your battery in this unit. And then if you've got your backup battery, you can work pretty much all day. So the next thing is during your inspection, one thing you want to make sure is if you're walking with your borescope, you want to thread it through whatever hole they've provided and carry the insertion tube. That way the insertion tube is not dragging on the floor or could have a potential to drop and break. The other really interesting thing is that you want to make sure that it's not coiled up when you're trying to articulate it, especially on a 5 or an 8 meter or even the 3 meter borescope, because when you have it coiled up like this several times and you try to articulate, it puts some pressure, undue pressure on the insertion tube itself, and you can break the articulation. And that goes for all borescope manufacturers, especially the servo motor driven ones. When you have them coiled up and you try to articulate them, it puts a lot of pressure on there. We tend to say that if you have a 5 or an 8 meter and you're in your inspection, just go ahead and let the insertion tube lay on the floor while you're going into your inspection. The next thing is when you're going through difficult spaces, let's say we're going through a tail rotor of a helicopter or the tail section of a helicopter, and you've got to get over some ribs. You want to steer over them. So you steer up, push, and then go through the rest of your inspection. That's true with piping too. When you get to a T, you can choose which side you want to go to with your T, and then go around that corner if necessary. The other thing is that guide tube like this is very useful. This is a flexible material similar to a coat hanger, and you can use it for your inspection to protect your insertion tube while you're going into some tight spaces, and it also helps guide through areas. The other thing is in large tubes. Let's say you're in an 1 inch or 1.5 inch pipe, you might want to have a centering device on your borescope that would clip on just like this. It gets you off that off the sidewall so you can actually look down in the inspection. That's also what makes our dual camera especially useful, is if you don't have a lot of room to articulate in an inspection, you can just switch cameras and look down. And then on top of that, you have a rigid rigidizer, which you would go into your insertion tube. This is for clearing gaps, or if you have a straight tube that you need to get to and then articulate afterward. These are all common products that are used in the borescope industry. Then the next thing to do is, once you're in your inspection, one of the best ways to reduce glare or get the best pictures is to lower the amount of light level or change the light level on your borescope. And also is not get a direct light picture. If you have really shiny material that you're looking at, you might want to articulate just a little bit and then take that photo. And best practice would be to let go of the insertion tube and try to have the borescope resting on something that is solid, so that when you take that picture, you don't disturb the insertion tube when you're taking it, or the video. And then when you're pulling your insertion tube out of the inspection, you can actually steer it out, just like when you were going in and you steered in. You can steer out of the inspection, and that will help negate any issues with when you are in an inspection and maybe you've hooked something. Just steer out of that and then pull all the way out. Don't ever try to, like, if you feel your insertion tube is caught or stuck, the best thing to do would be to try to straighten out and go back in to your inspection and then gently pull back out. There shouldn't be a ton of resistance when you're coming out of the inspection. And then when you're finished with your inspection, best practice would be to clean the lens again, wipe down the insertion tube, clean it, and then make sure when you're placing your borescope, you place the borescope in the case first and coil the insertion tube around, at least in our cases, coil the insertion tube around the case. And then the very last thing is to make sure the distal tip is pushed all the way into whatever crevice or space that it needs to be into. Because again, the number one repair we see is somebody closing the insertion tube in the case, and it crushes the insertion tube. They lock it down, and all of a sudden you look down and the insertion tube's hanging out, and you've got a costly repair, and we want to try to avoid those for you. So those are the main tips and tricks that we have for you today. We'd love to open it up for any questions if anybody has any. Thank you very much for your time, and let's see if we have any questions. Well, looks like we don't have any questions. So again, I'd love to have you schedule a one-on-one time with me. We can talk about the different types of borescopes we have. Namely, its diameter and length are the main two reasons, or main two questions that you have about an inspection. You want to get the appropriate length borescope and diameter for your borescope, because it's critical for when you are in an inspection that you have the right tooling. So again, thank you very much for your time and visiting the ViewTech ASNT virtual booth.
For more information, please contact me on my cell phone at 231-252-0504, or you can visit our website at viewtech.com.